Attention!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, once again I have the honour and privilege to introduce to you a familiar face, a man born in Balmore, Alberta, 96 years ago, a man whose job it was to recover downed pilots, often behind enemy lines. He was a member of the Airborne Search and Rescue. I would ask Comrade Lionel Burnett to step forward, please.
In Flanders Field. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row that mark our place. And in the sky the larks still bravely sing and fly, scarce heard amidst the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved. And now we lie in Flanders Field.
Today we remember the many Canadians who gave their lives valiantly defending our nation and fighting for a better world. This is a great place to live, thanks to those who served in our armed forces, and it continues to be great thanks to the men and women who continue to serve us in uniform today. And it isn't just those in uniform who make the sacrifices, but the families that wait every day when their loved ones are away. Our community in Nelson has a long and noble history of military service, from the Nelson Rifle Company, founded in 1898, to the Rocky Mountain Rangers, to the 54th Battalion, the 24th Field Artillery Regiment, and others. Soldiers and companies from this region have received honors for their service during every war, including both World Wars, the Korean War, and most recently in Afghanistan. And this year we remember the 100th anniversary of the Battle of the Somme. And next year, 2017, which is our 150th birthday, it will mark the 100th year since the Battle of Vimy Ridge, where 3,598 Canadians were killed and another 7,000 were wounded. And since Confederation, 2.3 million Canadians have signed up for military service, and 118,000 of those have died in uniform.
I want to acknowledge the work of local historian Patricia Rogers, who guided my research to recognize local families who made great sacrifices in service to our country in World War II. Canada joined Britain and the Allies in the declaration of war on September 10th, 1939. 1.1 million men served in all branches. A total of 45,000 Canadians died and 54,000 Canadians were wounded. Some women joined the Canadian nursing sisters who served in Great Britain, the European and Middle Eastern and African fronts. Nelson residents Nancy Lee, Elizabeth Stewart, Muriel Aher, and Kitty Ridley served with the sisters, and all four survived the war. By the middle of 1944, close to 1,300 men from Nelson and area had joined up. 65 of the boys who served and 6 who died were members of Miss Amy Ferguson's remarkable choir. More than half of our casualties, a total of 38 men, took place in 1944. Many Japanese Canadians were interned in the Slocan Valley. It was the Doukhobors who came to the rescue of these families the first winter of 1942 with truckloads of fresh vegetables. Noted geneticist David Suzuki was one of the internees. From homemade lemonade stands to service organizations, Nelson raised more funds per capita to purchase war bonds than any other city in Canada. Nelson was given the title of the most patriotic town in BC early in the war. Nelson was also known as the knitting city because of people like the Russells. Too old to fight, but not to knit. Mr. and Mrs. John Russell, an elderly Granite Road couple, knit side by side starting in December 1939, and by February 1941 had turned in over 190 pairs of socks to the Red Cross. In 1941, the Canadian Red Cross shipped 36,000 pounds of Nelson jam overseas. And in 1942, the McDonald Jam Factory received an order for 6,000 cases of jam for the men building the Alaska Highway. Canada produced approximately 14,000 aircraft, including the Lancaster and Mosquito bombers. In the fall of 1943, Boeing Aircraft Canada established 9 satellite manufacturing plants. Boeing took over Nelson's Civic Center Badminton Hall and assembled belt frames and other small fittings for Catalina flying boats. It is clear that Nelson did its part. Today we remember 18-year-old ordinary seaman George Henry Trevelyan Rasmussen. George was the first Nelson area man to die in the war from burns he suffered while on patrol with the HMS Woolwich, December 9th, 1939. He lived in Willow Point and enlisted in England in October 1939. His father was a constable with the BC Police. George was a popular boy who loved to laugh, enjoyed swimming for hours in Kootenay Lake, and attended Nelson High School. Captain Fred Thornton Peters was 53 years old when he died on November 8, 1942. He won the Victoria Cross for auspicious bravery. In February 1944, a distinguished group of American soldiers representing President Roosevelt attended at the home of Captain Peters' sister, Mrs. Dudney, where his mother was bedridden. They presented Mrs. Peters with her son's posthumous U.S. Distinguished Service Cross, the highest award given by the U.S. government to a foreigner. Pilot Officer Richard Sidney Horswell, known as Sid, was with the RCAF's number 14 Advanced Flying School stationed in the Midlands of England. On July 2nd, 1942, his aircraft broke up in midair and all 4 aboard were killed. He was 24 years old. Sid was a natural leader, athlete, and a scholar. He was a soloist with Mrs. Amy Ferguson's choir. A few days after winning his wings in January 1942, Sid married Margaret Peggy Gibbon at St. Saviour's Cathedral. They were only married 4 months before Sid left overseas. Donald Ernest Gibbon crashed 7 miles northwest of Foggia, just inland from the Adriatic coast. Both engines failed, but he managed to maintain control of the plane until his crew bailed out and he went down with the plane. He was 3 weeks shy of his 21st birthday. Donald loved to play tennis, baseball, swim, and play hockey. His brother was to become the managing editor of the Nelson Daily News, and his sister Peggy, was the widow of Pilot Officer Sid Hochswell. Pilot Officer Francis Larry Flynn, age 26, lived in the Valican Passmore area of Slocan Valley. He died on June 26, 1942, when his airplane went missing. His name is engraved on the Runnymede Memorial at Inglefield Green, Surrey, 24 miles west of London, England. Of the 3,050 Canadian airmen on the memorial, 6 of them are also commemorated on the Nelson Cenotaph. From Leonard Cohen, a quote. "Oh, the wind is blowing, through the graves the wind is blowing. Freedom soon will come, then we will come from the shadows." Today we remember all of them who served and thanked their family for their sacrifice.